Not so much a press conference as an anxiety dream played out in real time. In bright sunshine and the picture-perfect setting of an English country garden, Prime Minister May stood graciously beside the President who'd just rubbished her whole plan for Brexit hours earlier. This time, he was eager to lavish praise on the PM, telling the media their relationship was the highest level of special. Moments later, like the world's worst boyfriend in front of a vulnerable beloved, he reiterated his belief that her nemesis, the recently departed Boris Johnson, would make a great Prime Minister. It was excruciating, it was vulgar, it was exaggerated, ultimately perhaps deeply predictable. It was everything we've come to expect from America's 45th president, but tonight he is gone and she'll be left with a headache. Does anything he said alter what she does next? Nick Watt reports.
With your smile so...
As with all special relationships, this couple have been through a rocky patch. But Theresa May and Donald Trump are back together after a note of contrition from the errant partner.
When I saw her this morning, I said, I want to apologize because I said such good things about you. She said, don't worry, it's only the press.
The disruptor-in-chief showered the Prime Minister with praise after ripping into her Brexit strategy. But some of the fundamentals remain unchanged.
I think she's a terrific woman. I think she's doing a terrific job. And that Brexit is a very tough situation. That's a tough deal between the borders and the entries into the countries and all of the things. So she's going to do the best. The only thing I ask is that she work it out so that we can have very even trade.
There will be no limit to the possibility of us doing trade deals around the rest of the world once we leave the European Union on the basis of the agreement that was made here at Chequers and that I've put forward to the European Union. And just to be clear, that is an agreement that delivers on the Brexit vote that we had in 2016 here in the UK, that delivers what I believe is at the forefront of people's minds when they were voting to leave the European Union.
Someday.
Sweetness and light in the Chequers sunshine. But there will always be more than two people in this relationship.
Boris Johnson, I think, would be a great Prime Minister.
And in every relationship, it is complicated. Anger in the summer air, though friends of Theresa May say she's entitled to a moment of relaxation after a potentially disastrous visit was rescued at the 11th hour. But the President's challenge to the Prime Minister on Brexit shone a light on the defining issue of her premiership and provided fodder for both sides. If the visit wasn't punishment enough, the Prime Minister invited Brexiteer Tories to air their concerns over tea shortly after the President had left. This group are seizing on his Brexit intervention.
Obviously, as a Brexiteer, I'm very pleased that the President of a great country like the US is on the side of us Brexiteers, and that he can see, you know, the dangers and the consequences that us Brexiteers can see for our country.
But a pro-European Tory who recently resigned from the government over Brexit believes the President's intervention highlights the concerns of his side.
The plan agreed at Chequers last week is, you know, coming into contact with geopolitical reality. This is not a done deal. We've got to go to Europe and cut this deal. And I think President Trump's intervention is, look, if you want to have a deal with us, this is how it's going to be. And I'm guessing the European Union will say, and this is how it's going to be. And I don't quite see how we do both.
One Tory grandee believes the episode has strengthened the Prime Minister, who will be able to negotiate a strong transatlantic trade deal without jeopardising EU links.
My view is, and always has been, that we should ride all the horses. This country has survived and prospered in the world by being clever and nimble. And we are now leaving the European Union, to my regret, but we are leaving the European Union. We're going to have as close a relationship as we possibly can with the European Union, of course, a whole wide range of issues, including especially trade and security and all the rest of it. And we're going to have a big trade arrangement with the United States of America. I very much hope. It's in the interests of all sides, America, Europe, Britain. It's in everyone's interest that this works.
Never change.
It was a proud day for this most royalist of US presidents, though his protocol may need a little work. Faltering relationships do have their awkward moments, And now, this one is back on track, though the choices flowing from Brexit guarantee future challenges.
Just the way you look tonight.
Well, that was Nick Watt. Nick's here now. Nick, we heard Donald Trump praising Johnson in your piece there. What news of the former Foreign Secretary now? What's he up to next week?
Well, Boris Johnson is back. The Daily Telegraph tomorrow announcing that he's signed his column again. That will be back on Monday. And as I understand it, he's planning to make a speech in Parliament on Wednesday explaining why he resigned as Foreign Secretary. Now, it's interesting Wednesday. He is therefore doing it after 2 days of Brexit legislations and votes on Monday and Tuesday. And the reason for the delay is that he wants to sort of express his very, very deep concern at the way that Brexit is going, but he doesn't want to be a sort of a rallying point for conservative Brexiteers who are thinking of defeating the government. And the danger for the government is that on 2 days running, there are going to be 2 yes and no votes on these 2 bills. And there is a theoretical possibility that the Labour Party, which is guaranteed to vote against these bills, that they could be joined with quite a large number of Brexiteer Tories. Interesting, though, I spoke to one of those senior Brexiteer Tories. This person said to me that to vote with Labour would be an act of war against Theresa May, and they're thinking very, very carefully, maybe now is not quite the time to do that.
Fascinating, Nick. What does Labour think of that as an idea? Ed Miliband was on the protest march earlier today, and this evening I spoke to the former Labour leader from his Doncaster constituency, started by talking to him about what about Donald Trump he was protesting against.
Well, most importantly, his values, his racism, his misogyny, his respect for authoritarian regimes and his apparent contempt for democratic regimes. And I think it is important to take a stand on this, because I do think that his values and where he stands are on the side of, they seem to be on the side of authoritarianism and not on the side of the democratic values that I think are shared across political parties in the UK. I thought it was an extraordinary number of people that came out. I think they spoke for lots of people in Britain. The thousands spoke for the millions of people in Britain who feel this way. So I think it was right to take a stand.
Was it right that he was here?
Well, I personally, if I'd been in Theresa May's shoes, would not have done it this way. I wouldn't have rushed to the White House at the first opportunity. I'm afraid it hasn't really got her anything. I almost felt sorry for her in that press conference, but it was classic Trump. He lied by claiming that him criticizing her was fake news. That was a lie. He attacked the press, and he made appalling remarks about immigration and its effect on Europe. Now, to be fair, she did disagree with that, but for my liking, she was too passive. She's been too passive. And if you like, this is the moment when you're either siding with a guy who respects authoritarians, likes dictators, and comes along and tries to upend democratic countries. He did it with Merkel at the NATO summit. He did it with May here with his Sun interview. So you're either on that side or his side. I'm afraid we've looked too much on his side, really.
Where do you think the Trump visit has now left that Brexit deal? Is he right about the Chequers deal she's concocted?
Well, in relation to the Chequers deal, I have a different perspective on it. Look, I actually think it's a sort of modest step forward from the previous position, but I still have real worries about what it means for services, 80% of the economy excluded. I have real worries about whether the customs partnership proposal, whatever it's now called, can actually really work. And it's not really a deal because it's actually got to now be negotiated with the European Union. So I don't, if he's in a sort of hard Brexit Farage Johnson position, I obviously don't share his perspective on that. On the wider US front, I think this US trade deal is a mirage. I don't think it's going to happen. I think if it did happen, the impact would be marginal. And actually, you know, I don't think we want to buy the American chlorinated chicken or beef hormone-related beef and all of that.
The only thing that unites all of you who say it's not a good deal is how differently you feel about what the outcome should be. Isn't the truth that the gamble is now between no deal and no Brexit, and half are pushing for a hard no deal and half are pushing for, you know, a very soft, almost nothing Brexit?
I don't see it that way. look, I think in the end, Parliament has got to be sovereign in relation to this. And it's got to be a deal that can command a majority across Parliament. And we cannot make economically disastrous decisions for our country. And certainly it could be in relation to services, and it could be in relation to the customs union, not just economically, in relation to Northern Ireland. We can't be forced into terrible decisions because of some threat which I don't believe.
What about if the EU were to accept this? Would you still reject it, or would you say, come on, we've got 6 months, we're halfway there, we can iron out the rest as we go?
I don't think ironing out the rest as we go is a great way forward. I think we've got to look at the deal that comes back, and we've got to take a decision on its merits. But if you're asking me, am I worried about the impact on services? Am I worried about the impact on Northern Ireland of what's been sketched out in Chequers, albeit that it's better than what seemed to be on offer before? Yes, I am worried about it.
But does worried mean that
the notion, as I say, that we should be...
Sorry, does worried mean that you could imagine accepting it still? No.
Well, I'm saying no, I don't like this deal, no. I don't like this deal. I don't decide Labour's position. I'm going to be guided by Labour's position on this. But if you're asking me what do I think of the deal that it's not a deal, the Chequers position that she has outlined, I have deep worries about what it means for our country going forward.
Let me finish by saying you are in Doncaster now, your own constituency, heavily Leave vote there. Do you feel, when you are constantly arguing against the wishes of many of the people around you that voted for you, that you are encouraging essentially a democratic deficit?
Well, I'm not arguing against their position. I mean, look, what I've been saying to you in this interview is, I accept the result of the referendum.
Union.
As you say, my constituent... Well, and to be fair, Emily, the customs union and the single market were not a question on the ballot paper. What was on the ballot paper is, are we leaving or remaining in the European Union? And people voted to leave, as you say, heavily in my constituency. And, I do make this point, which is, I think this is about the unity of the country in the end, and how you can move past this. And that's why I say, respect the result, and that's really difficult for lots of people I know who supported Remain, and I understand why that's difficult. But at the same time, stay close to the European Union. And, in a way, if one thing, to unite the two bits of our conversation, if one thing is proved by today, if anything is proved, it's Donald Trump is an unreliable ally. If we care about the institutions of the UN, the European Union, NATO, we can't just cut ourselves off. We've got to remain closely aligned with the European Union.
Ed Miliband, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, in a moment, we're going to digest what went on today with our panel, the historian Simon Sharma, Dia Chakravarti, the Telegraph's Brexit editor, Anthony Gardner, who was Barack Obama's ambassador to the EU between 2014 and 17, and Freddie Gray, the Spectator's deputy editor. First, a brief test of the waters away from those large protests today. The marginal constituency of Walsall North was won by the Tories at that last fateful election. Its population voted Leave. So after Trump's intervention and last week's deal at Chequers, what is their take on Brexit? David Grossman reports.
Walsall North was one of half a dozen seats that the Conservatives gained from Labour at the last general election, bucking the national trend. Why? Well, many believe there is a one-word explanation: Brexit.
The Prime Minister's Brexit deal, or proposed deal, is beginning to filter out of the Westminster bubble into real-world communities. The West Midlands was crucial to Theresa May hanging on to power in 2017, and how the deal plays here is crucial. Do people who voted to leave think they're getting the Brexit they voted for?
So how do Conservative activists view the Brexit White Paper? John Sheath and Raj Palverdi are immersed in West Midlands Conservative politics. They know the minds of local party members as well as anyone.
I think they want closure. They want this deal done, sealed. Not here. I think if there is another referendum, I think the vote will be even more to leave than remain.
Really? More?
Yes.
Why do you say that?
Because I think people are now looking at they've now got an understanding of the detail of what immigration was, what the tariffs were, what is happening in terms of customs union, free movement of people, how it's affecting the infrastructure in this country, how the hospitals are being overburdened, how the GP surgeries can't cope, how schools can't cope, how the housing Departments can't cope with the extra influx of people without any planning, any thought given to freedom of movement. Doesn't mean people just coming. Yes, what about the remaining infrastructure? Pressure on our schools, hospitals, many public services.
I don't know whether people have changed their mind. I think people are getting tired of Brexit. They're seeing it every day. They're seeing different people putting different ideas forward.
Do you think there might be an appetite then to take a deal just to end the process?
I think with some people that could be the case. I know of a person that felt very strongly about the recent white paper and felt it didn't go far enough. But I think overall, I think people would like to get a deal done. And we can move on. I think it's a case of being able to move on from what's gone on over the last year and a half. It's just it feels like it's hard work.
Voters in Walsall North talking to David Grossman there. Let's move on to our panel. A welcome again to Simon, to Dia, to Anthony and to Freddie. Nice of you all to come in at this late hour. I began the night by asking what just happened. Simon, to you. Where are we left now, 24 hours on?
Well, with an incredible theatrical display of a kind of free radical, a surprising term to... what we've seen, actually, is the kind of bipolar Trump to the max. The interview with The Sun, undercutting Theresa May, lauding the capacities of Boris Johnson to be the next Prime Minister, saying that all European culture, the fabric of Europe has been changed, is one kind of Trump. Absolutely authentic Trump, then followed by the sweeping up exercise today. So the effect of that is pretty much actually we were in the position of often his own administration, not having a clue which is the real Trump and not knowing, therefore, how you could proceed.
Doesn't have a clue, doesn't care, just made the wrong call on Thursday night. How do you read it, Freddie?
Well, I think one of the myths about Trump is that he's wildly unpredictable. He's wild, but it's not really unpredictable.
No.
I think you could, it'd be impossible to predict how today would have played out. That would take a real prognosticator. But we all knew that he was going to do something quite crazy. We didn't know what it would be. And then there would be a press conference and he'd roll back from it and try and be more sympathetic. That's how he rolls. It's how he rolls with Kim Jong-un and how he rolls with Theresa May. But I think the overriding thing is just the hilarity of it. And then actually, I mean, even people who really, really hate Donald Trump just find it funny now. And something's changing there. Right?
So funny is dangerous or funny is good?
It's hard to know. I mean, I tend to think funny's good. Because I'm a very shallow person.
Well, because you're not taking him seriously in terms of the danger that he may represent or that people believe.
I'm never taking him literally or seriously, no.
But it's not a side-splitting gas, really, without being too solemn, to basically nearly destroy the WTO, to sort of attack NATO so that, bodies are rolling around.
No,
it's not
grave matters of state, and I realise they are serious and important. But I just defy anyone not to watch that press conference and laugh.
Let's get back to the matters of state. Did he leave Theresa May looking a fool? Did we feel sorry for her, dear? What was your takeaway?
I thought the expectations were so low. We were expecting Theresa May to look and act really, really awkward around him. And I do think he is unpredictable, if I may disagree with a little bit with Freddie. I do think he's a bit unpredictable. I'm not sure we knew how exactly he was going to behave, particularly after that Sun interview. But it seemed to me that she didn't look quite as awkward as we expected her to look. In the end, when he did, row back, it seemed like they did manage to finish it off quite amicably. But the two things that I took away from it is that, at least for the duration of the press conference, I don't know what's going to happen afterwards if Trump is going to change his mind, but for the duration of the press conference, Downing Street had managed to convince him of two things, it seemed. One is that she cannot walk away because she is stuck. That's what he said. That's a direct quote. And also from the EU, that is. And the second thing is that he said that he had read reports that a deal, if the Chequers agreement was to go ahead, a deal with the US would not be possible. He has now changed his mind after speaking to her. I'm taking that as Downing Street. And apparently a deal now is absolutely possible.
So I wonder where it leaves us with this intervention by US presidents. You worked very closely with Obama. He memorably intervened just just before the Brexit vote itself, advising against it. Did he set a precedent now that Trump has just followed, or was that a mistake, or is it ever the right moment for a US president to crack
Well, the
into
two
the
things are
affairs?
not remotely similar. He came here and he said something which I regretted. He said back of the queue. I thought that was not the right thing to say.
Did you tell him that at the time?
I certainly did. I didn't say to him that he should say it, and I was critical privately of that decision to say it.
Did David Cameron say it?
Well, no, I have no idea whether he did or not. But this was stated during a visit to support a head of state during a visit to the UK. And he was asked many times, because the US, remember, has a very significant interest in the decision about Brexit. The decision that the president has now made was made during a state visit to undermine a head of state when she was rolling out a head
difference, is it? So it's okay to come in as a loyal voice, but not to come in as, if you like, a disruptor in chief, next
also,
words.
the tone of those two comments, I think, cannot be compared. Also, it was based on a fundamental misunderstanding, if I can just get into this point about the free trade agreement. A lot of U.S. companies, and I spoke to many of them over the 3 years of my tenure in Brussels, want the UK to remain closely aligned with the EU because Britain has been a gateway to the EU market. Same reason for the Japanese companies who invested here. That's the first thing. So to think that American companies all want the UK to ditch EU regulations is incorrect. The second point is on agriculture. It is true, it's a big bone in our throats that the EU has these regulations about hormones and GMOs and so forth. But the idea that the UK is going to ditch all of those regulations, do a free trade deal, is crazy. It's not going to happen.
And this was Ed Miliband's point just earlier. He doesn't actually like the idea of a trade deal with the US. He thinks there is nothing particularly to trust in that, either with Trump or with what it means for future standards in the UK.
I think Trump is sincere when he says that he would love a beautiful trade deal. I don't know.
But what I'm saying is the Miliband point is we shouldn't be chasing this anyway. We're crazy to start chasing a deal with the US on trade, which is far from perfect.
I think it would be crazy to... Sorry, carry on.
No, I was going to say, I think the Brexiteers' point would be it should be up to us and not to Brussels to decide what should and should not be acceptable to us. And if we are leaving ourselves in a position when we're becoming rule takers without any say in making those rules, then it's not really us who are deciding this.
But there's a whole illusion anyway. I mean, American trade accounts for, as we all know, 17 or 18% of total trade, as against last year, or I think 2016, EU was 43%. That basic issue of commercial proximity is not going to change. So the issue is actually what kind of ingratiation to kind of kowtow to Trumpian bluster and bullying do we have to go through for this miserable 17%?
Do you agree? None of this has made any difference in terms of holding hands or helping him down the aisle or whatever she did when she went to
I do disagree to
Washington.
extent, and I think that it would be very foolish to shun Trump because we find him so vulgar and abhorrent. When we do need America, no one's naive enough to think that America can suddenly swap with Europe as a trading partner and be equally important. That doesn't mean it could not be very important to Britain, and therefore
Brexiteers are prioritising a free trade, easy trade with Europe. Of course, that's what they're talking about.
I think Brexiteers would say that we need to do trade deals with both sides. It's not one or the other. It never was the case.
No, the issue is not shunning Trump. The issue is speaking up and defending one's values when they're being attacked. For courts are being attacked or justices are being attacked.
And have we done that enough, do you think?
Here in this country?
Yes.
Well, I was disappointed when I saw in this country as well, during the Brexit debate, judges being attacked and the media being attacked. This is a very dangerous road. And I think you've written about this as well. Enemies of the people. We are not that many steps away from the 1930s. So it is important for leaders to stand up and say certain things are unacceptable. And for the EU to remind this president that it has leverage and is going to use leverage on trade in particular.
So on that note, should Theresa May have told Trump he was utterly wrong and misguided and out of step to make the remarks he did on the Brexit deal? And critically, what are her MPs and voters thinking now about this Chequers proposal?
It won't have done it a whole lot of good, you have to say. I mean, the notion is actually that when Obama, I agree actually that it was regrettable that he chose to intervene. It famously had a backlash effect. I don't know, I'm not quite sure if this will have a backlash. In fact, Donald Trump attacking the Chequers deal is the best chance it has of being popular. I'm not sure I quite believe that, but it can't have done it a great deal of good. Should Theresa May have said something? Maybe she did. Maybe she did in private, but I'd be kind of surprised. The answer is yes, she should. It's not just a matter of actually, I agree with Ed Miliband, but it's not just a matter of kind of abstractly defined human rights, basic civil decency, separating 3-year-olds from their parents not really being a good or moral idea. It's a case of actually attacking, making NATO inoperable. I mean, he has a point that everybody should pay their fair due, but he does it in the way of a kind of raucous, destructive, blundering, ignorant bully.
I want to talk about May now, and talking of decency, dear, your paper this week accused her of treason.
No, it absolutely did not. I'm sorry.
It asked a question of whether she was being treasonous.
It asked a question, and if you read the article, which I think everybody should, it actually said, no, she absolutely is not guilty of that. But the point that article was making is that we have been receiving letters suggesting that, and we have not actually printed those letters. But
is she guilty of treason? That was the question you asked.
And the article very clearly said that she wasn't.
Oh, well, you could say, is she a murderer? And then say she wasn't. I mean, you're raising the question.
I think that's so lazy to just read a headline and not actually give the writer who wrote that article quite sensitively to actually read the entire article and then judge it.
So I'm hearing no regrets.
So I think that's
if
just...
a lot of people are saying Theresa May's a murderer, I think it's fair enough to ask the question and then answer
it.
Just to clarify for our viewers, nobody's saying Theresa May's a murderer. But on this question of treason, it's a bigger, it's a bigger issue that you're talking about. Do people feel that she has betrayed the Brexit ideal to the point where they're not going to back this Chequers?
Well, if anything, if we can read anything from the hundreds and thousands of letters that we've been getting, then a lot of people are very, very worried and feel betrayed that she, as a Remainer, asked Brexiteers to lend her their support, which they did, and now they feel betrayed.
You know how the EU works better than anyone here. Do you think that she will get this as a deal through the EU?
No. There's no chance.
Right.
There's no chance on either the single market or the customs partnership. Let's be clear about it. But the EU needs to be very careful. It can't just say no because of the risk of undermining your position. But what's been proposed are things, in most cases, that cannot be accepted. Let's be clear about something. The UK, while it's been a member, has tried to have all of the advantages of being a non-member. Now that it's seeking to be a non-member, it's seeking to have all the advantages of being a member. The EU wants to have a single market for goods while having a lot of the advantages of being out, right? Including not accepting the free movement of people. And the customs union says, well, we're not part of the customs union, but we want this new framework of a customs partnership that gives us all of the advantages of being actually in the customs union.
So you've made us feel like we're actually just having a pillow fight here that is not even going to get as far as Brussels then.
Well, it represents progress. It does represent progress, right? And I hope this is, let's be clear.
With a big no at the end of it.
But I regret the fact that so much time has been taken over the last year and a half or 2 years since the referendum on fighting battles that couldn't be won. I've been negotiating for a living, and I believe you should negotiate on the basis of a true understanding of your true leverage and fighting the battles you can win.
We've run out of time. Thank you all very much indeed. Thank you for coming in.
Negotiation.
Well, you could stay for another 6 months if you want.